Hello, Global Ed Allies. My name is Jussi Roms. I'm school principal in Finland, in southern Finland, and I'm gonna tell you the story of Finland, history of Finland. Well, broadly speaking, Finnish history can be divided into 4 chapters: prehistory, the Swedish period from medieval ages to 1809, the Russian period from 1809 to 1917, and the independent period from 1917 to this day. People have lived in the region of Finland since the Ice Age, about 11,000 years. Habitation first settled along water routes, and since the busy trading traffic has always passed through the region. The first written sources that mention Finland date back to the 12th and 13th centuries. Until the middle of the 12th century, the geographical area that is now Finland was political vacuum. It was one of the farmost places in Europe, far in the north. Around that time, Crusades brought Finland into the sphere of power of the Roman Pope, Swedish kings, and the medieval network of Hansa traders in the Baltic Sea. The Catholic Church spread to the region of Finland from Sweden, while the Orthodox Church did the same from Novgorod, currently Russia, in the east. The struggle for control of the region between Sweden and Novgorod ended with the Treaty of Göteborg in 1323. That was the first time that Finland got a border to Russia. With the treaty, the Catholic faith was established in western and southern parts of Finland, and the Orthodox faith in eastern Finland. Relevant parts of Finland became a tight part of the Swedish kingdom. But still, most of the present-day Finland consisted of uninhabited forests. There were not many people living in Finland at that time. Later, in the 16th century, the Reformation replaced Catholicism with Lutheranism in all the Nordic countries. I will tell you something about the Swedish reign. As a consequence of Swedish domination, the fast developing Swedish legal and social system took root in Finland. Feudalism was not part of the system, like in Central Europe, and the Finnish peasants were never serfs. They always retained their personal freedom, in both in Finland and Sweden. Finland's most important center was the town of Turku in the west. Founded in the middle of the 13th century, it was also the bishop seat. Turku's castle is the oldest medieval castle in Finland. The Reformation started by Martin Luther in Germany in the early 16th century. It also reached Sweden and Finland under the reign of Swedish King Gustav Vasa. The Catholic Church consequently lost out to the Lutheran faith. The Reformation set in motion a great rise in Finnish language and in Finnish culture. The New Testament was translated into Finnish in 1548 by the Bishop of Turku. His name was Mikael Agricola. He brought the Reformation to Finland and created written Finnish language. The entire Bible appeared in Finnish in 1642. During its period as a great power in Northern Europe, Sweden extended its realm around the Baltic and northern Germany during continuous European wars in the 17th century. At the same time, Sweden managed, due to the weakness of Russia, to push the border further east. With consolidation of the administration in Stockholm, uniform Swedish rule was extended to Finland in the 17th century. Swedish was the language of noble class, governance, and education, but was also widely spoken among all the population who lived near the coastlines. Inland peasants spoke Finnish. In early 18th century, Sweden lost its position as a North European superpower, although it had had the most modern system of governance, which had made it a very efficient and capable country, despite of its small resources and small population. It couldn't keep its position anymore. During the Great Northern War in early 18th century, Finland was occupied and destroyed by Russians. Sweden got most of Finland back after the peace treaty of Neustadt, but lost the Baltic states and eastern Finland. Tsar Peter the Great established the city of St. Petersburg. It became the new capital of Russia, and it was very close to Finland, at the end of the Bay of Finland. Russian security matters of the new capital affected Finnish history very much from then on. There was a new era to start. Finland became a Grand Duchy. When Sweden lost its position as a great power in the early 18th century, in early 18th century, Russian pressure on Finland increased. Finland was occupied again for a short period in mid-18th century. But during the Napoleonic Wars in early 19th century, European borders were reshaped, and one consequence of Napoleonic Wars was that Sweden and Russia had a war, the Finnish War. Russia conquered Finland in that war, and the 700 years history of Finland as the eastern province of Sweden ended. During the Swedish period, Finland was merely a group of provinces and not a national entity. It was governed from Stockholm, from the Swedish capital. But when Finland joined Russia in 1809, after Russia conquered Finland from Sweden, Finland became an autonomous Grand Duchy. The Grand Duke was the Russian emperor, whose representative in Finland was the Governor General. The enlightened Russian Emperor Alexander I, who was the first Grand Duke of Finland, gave Finland extensive autonomy, and thereby he created the Finnish state. Finland had its own old Swedish laws, Swedish language as the language of governance, education, and literalism as religion. In 1812, Helsinki was made the capital of Finland, not Turku anymore. And the university, which had been founded in Turku in 1640, was moved to Helsinki. Finland's highest governing body was the Senate, whose members were Finns. Matters concerning Finland were presented to the emperor in St. Petersburg by the Finnish Minister Secretary of State. That meant that the administration of autonomous Finland was handled directly by the emperor, and the Russian authorities were therefore unable to interfere Finland. The Finnish areas lost by Sweden in wars of 17th century were given back to the Grand Duchy. So you can see here the map of Finland when Finland was an autonomous part of Russia, and the capital was Helsinki. The Finnish national movement gained momentum during the Russian period. The Finnish national epic, the Kalevala, created by Elias Lönnrot, was published in 1835. The language decree issued in 1863 by the Tsar Alexander II marked the beginning of the process through which Finnish became an official administrative language, and also another language of education, little by little. The Finnish Diet was convened in 1863 after a break of more than half a century. From then on, the Diet met regularly, and active legislative work in Finland began. In 1860, Finland adopted its own currency, the markka. The Conscription Act of 1878 gave Finland an army of its own, army that participated in Russian wars, but as a Finnish army. Industrialization started too, and made Finland more and more like other countries in North Europe. The obliteration of Finnish separatism, a policy also known as Russification, started at the end of the 19th century. Here is a picture what happened after the Manifesto 1899. The same happened in all areas under Russian power, in countries like Poland. Russia didn't want it to have any more autonomous areas inside its borders. The revolution 1905 in Russia, after the lost Russian-Japan War, gave Finland a short breathing spell, while a new legislative body to replace the old estates was created in 1906. At that time, this was the most radical parliamentary reform in Europe, because Finland moved in one bound from a four-estate diet to an unicameral parliament and universal suffrage. Finnish women were the first in Europe to gain the right to vote in parliamentary elections. The First World War led to a collapse of two big Central and Eastern European empires, Russia and Austria. So that's why many new independent states emerged in Central and Eastern Europe. One of them was Finland. On December 6, 1917, Finnish Parliament approved the Declaration of Independence. And from then on, Finland considered itself as an independent country. At the same time, the breach between the parties of the left and right had become very severe. Although Finland had one of the most democratic parliamentary systems in Europe, laws of local decision-making processes had not been remodeled. Social-economic challenges were great, rules of working life were outdated, and land-owning questions were not resolved. And to put everything to a wider perspective, at the same time, there was a socialist revolution in Russia. That was a model for the Finnish socialists. And they got help from Russia. The whole Europe, actually, at that time was a mess, and societies in Europe were tearing apart. And what happened in Finland? At the end of January 1918, the left-wing parties made a coup in Helsinki and in southern Finland. And government was forced to flee Helsinki to central western Finland. A bloody civil war broke out between the Reds, the labor movement, and the Whites, the government troops. The war ended in May with a victory for the government troops, held by Germany and led by General Gustav Mannerheim, the later hero of the Second World War. Finland became a republic in the summer of 1919, was one of the only republics in Europe at that time. And K.G. Ståhlberg was elected as the first president. In the early years of independence, Finland's position was fragile. The independent republic developed briskly during the 1920s. The wounds sustained in the Civil War were alleviated by conciliatory measures, such as including the Social Democrats in the government. Many social reforms were made, new rules of working life were introduced, and land-owning questions were resolved. 1921 Act on Compulsory Education made it mandatory to attend 6 years of elementary school. In the 1930s, only few countries in Europe could maintain their democracy. Those were UK, France, all the 3 Benelux countries, Czechoslovakia, and the 4 Nordic countries, including Finland. Iceland was not independent at that time. Also, but a bad time was to come. The Second World War was to begin. In August 1939, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, which included a secret protocol that meant that Finland and the Baltic countries were now in the Soviet sphere of interest. Poland was to be split by the 2 reigns. When Finland refused to exchange some Eastern Finland territories with the Soviets and didn't allow the Soviet Union to build military bases on Finnish soil, the Soviet Union attacked Finland. That happened on November 13th, 1939. The first part of Finland in the Second World War, Winter War, had started. In Winter War, Finland stood alone. Other countries offered only sympathy and modest assistance. Finnish ski troops, like you can see here. Inflicted heavy casualties on the Russian army. Finland's survival against overwhelming Russian forces became legendary all over the world. The Winter War ended in a peace treaty drawn up in Moscow on March 13th, 1940, giving southeastern Finland to the Soviet Union. But small Finland could hold on of its independence against a giant neighbor. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in the summer of 1941, Finland entered the war again, now with Germany. The second part of Finland in the Second World War, so-called continuation war, had started. The choice of Finland had been between cooperation with Nazi Germany and a chance to get back the lost territories, or another choice would have been just to wait the Soviet Union to attack again, and maybe that time it might have destroyed the whole country of Finland. You have to remember that at that time, France was already occupied by Germany. UK was in huge troubles with German military, and United States was isolated and didn't want it to participate what was happening in Europe. That was 6 months before Pearl Harbor. But I have to mention that United States never proclaimed a war on Finland, although Finland was cooperating with its enemy, Nazi Germany. That was because Americans understood how difficult the position of Finland, still a democratic country, had become because of its geography. The continuation war ended in armistice in September 1944. In addition to the areas already lost to Russia, Finland also ceded Petsamo in the Arctic Ocean. The terms of the armistice were confirmed in the Paris Peace Treaty of 1947. Almost no one who lived in the lost areas didn't want it to stay there. They all were evacuated to Finland that rest. So Finland fought the Soviet Union twice during Second World War. Finland lost both wars, but the Soviet Union could never occupy Finland. Actually, only 3 European capitals of those countries at war were not occupied. You have to remember this. Those capitals were London, Moscow, and Helsinki. We survived. The events of Second World War continue to stir emotions in Finland, because Finland was able to defend its territory in wars soon after gaining independence. Finland's wars in the 20th century have been considered in Finland as a time where the independence of the state of Finland became established by blood. Marshal Mannerheim, the commander of the Finnish army, both in Civil War and in the Second World War, was made the president of the Republic towards the end of the war. He was succeeded in 1946 by Juho Kusti Paasikivi, whose aim was to improve relations with the Soviet Union. As a defeated party, Finland had to pay the Soviet Union heavy war reparations in the form of goods The war reparations included, for example, trains, ships, and raw materials. The production of the war reparations helped Finland evolve from an agrarian country into an industrialized country. The industrialization started a migration from the countryside into the cities. In 1948, Finland and the Soviet Union signed an agreement of friendship, cooperation, and mutual assistance, where the countries promised to defend each other against external threats. Finland had no chance to say no to sign this treaty. In practice, Finland was in the Soviet Union's sphere of influence throughout the Cold War, and the country's foreign and domestic policy were guided by fear of the Soviet Union. But you have to remember that Finland still stayed democratic. It was not a communist country. But at the same time, the situation of Finland, it was very complex. Finland was between the East and West. The Olympic Games, it was an important event in Finland, summer 1952. 1955, Finland joined both the United Nations and the Nordic Council. Urho Kekkonen, who was elected president in 1956, worked to increase Finland's latitude in foreign policy by pursuing an active policy of neutrality. Neutrality was important for Finnish politics for a long time since. This was evident, for instance, in initiatives taken by Finland, such as the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, held in Helsinki in summer 1975. World leaders, including US President, came to Helsinki. Kekkonen led Finland for a quarter of a century before resigning because of poor health. Nowadays, a person can be a president of Finland only 2 terms, which means 12 years. But that was different at the era of Kekkonen. Mauno Koivisto was elected president in 1982 after Kekkonen. From 1960s, Finland made many social reforms to introduce a Scandinavian-style welfare state. In wealth, Finland was much behind of Sweden in 1960s, but in 1980s, it reached fast the standard of living like it was in other Nordic countries. Fast developing forest industry, metal industry, and more high-tech companies meant more and more wealth. And some words of recent history. The collapse of the Soviet Union and loan-based economic growth in the 1980s caused a recession in Finland in 1990s. The worst time of the recession was in the early 1990s. Many Finnish people were unemployed, companies went bankrupt, and the state had little money. The state had to save a lot. In about 1995, the Finnish economy started to grow, and it started to grow fast. The most important company was mobile phone company Nokia. 2007, Nokia sold 40% of all mobile phones worldwide. Finland joined the European Union in 1995 at the same time with Sweden and Austria. 2002, Finland was one of the first countries in Europe to adopt the euro currency. Finland became famous of its education system and of its society. 2000, Finland took first place in children's literacy in PISA studies. The president of the late 1990s was Martti Ahtisaari. He was awarded Nobel Peace Prize for successful peace negotiations around the globe. And after him, the first female president of Finland was elected. Her name is Tarja Halonen, and she was elected the year 2000. After the end of the Cold War, Finland still put resources on its army. Remember what I told you about the Second World War and how it has affected the Finnish minds. Finland put resources on its army and hold on conscription, unlike most of the European countries. In 1990s, Finland remodeled its air force and bought American F-18 Hornet warplanes. That deepened post-Cold War Finnish-American relations, although Finland still kept its non-allied status. It was not anymore called neutral, but it was non-allied. After Russian aggression 2 years ago against Ukraine, Finland put aside its non-aligned status. We are actually living quite an interesting time in the history of Finnish foreign affairs. And because of that, a year ago, Finland finally joined NATO. Finland was not anymore neutral, not anymore non-aligned, not anymore between East and West. Finland was strongly in West. Finnish parliament, I told something you about the history of it, but Finnish parliament today has a multi-party system and it's unicameral. No party can form a government alone in Finland, like in many countries, like in US, like in UK. So all the parties have to negotiate and they have to deal. President doesn't have much of domestic power, but president is the leader of the foreign affairs. Actually, this February 2024, after 2 terms of presidency of popular President Sauli Niinistö, we just got a new president called Alexander Stubb. He's a sporty former prime minister, 56 years old, speaks 5 languages fluently, and he was a professor of international affairs. I tell you this because I think that the election process and the campaigns tell something about Finland right now. Presidential campaign was polite and it was very much about content and about personal abilities, but not about mocking each other or spreading lies. I think we are proud of what we are. We are living difficult times nowadays. Climate change, Ukraine war, economical and social challenges in Finland and all around the globe, etc. But I believe that Finland can find its way and can flourish together with the rest of the world, especially with our allies and our friends. We work for it and we never give up. That's something about Finland. We call this attitude never give up, sisu. That has helped us to survive through the history, through the difficult times. And that has helped us to create this great country. I hope that you enjoyed of listening my little story about Finland. And I hope that you will have a chance to visit Finland to see everything here. Thank you. Kiitos.